This is More Than Money with Mapalo Maku, brought to you by Sasfin Wealth.
Welcome to More Than Money. I'm Mapalo Maku, a personal finance columnist, and I love having money conversations that change people's perspective about finances. Why am I doing this podcast, you might ask? To talk about money. Not the paper stuff. I mean the baggage, the feeling, the emotional, heart-wrenching stuff. We find this conversation so uncomfortable to have, which is why on this podcast, I have decided to have this very difficult conversations. We are going to have some difficult discussions because better money conversations lead to better money confidence, and healthy money dialogue leads to healthy money decisions. Today, I'm joined by Léan Boezaart, founding member and CEO of Freedom of Movement.
Thanks, Mapalo. It's great to be on the show. Hopefully, I can add some value.
So now we're going to talk about money. And oftentimes when people start businesses, when you started the business, was it more around, we want to make money? Or was it for the love of the craft? What was your thinking when you started this business?
It's a good question. I mean, in the early days of starting a business, money is always a bit of an obstacle. We started the business pretty much with our own sort of savings. At that stage, roughly 80,000 Rand or so that we scraped together. I just qualified as a chartered accountant. My brother is an engineer. We just went straight out of varsity, so obviously didn't have much. I think at that stage, I mean, obviously when you start a business, you eventually would want to make money. But I think we just fell in love with the idea of crafting something out of nothing and eventually building our own destiny. So I think that was more the mindset, other than making money in the early days. Obviously, you know, with the business model and the plan we had, you know, wasn't necessarily a game-changing idea, making a leather bag. You know, people have been making leather bags for decades and for centuries probably. So, you know, we didn't have a sort of an amazing idea, if you would want to call it that. We just fell in love with the idea of potentially building a brand, a South African brand that all South Africans could be proud of. I think that was more the driving force than making money. But I mean, obviously, as with any other business, you need a bit of money and cash flow to get going. So it was a challenge, but I won't say it was the first thing that came to mind. We're going to get stuck in this and into this, make leather bags and make a lot of money. You know, that wasn't really the driving force.
Yes. I like what you said, that, you know, going into business, obviously, there have been other people, craftsmen, who've made leather bags for many, many years and made other apparel and products out of leather. What did you guys think, you know, and even also, what did your peers and family say about starting a business where someone can take a look at it and say, but I mean, that's been done before. That's not rocket science. How did you get over that hurdle of maybe people saying things like that?
Yeah, I think it was more sort of the timing of when it happened. I think people were getting more into supporting South African brands and South African businesses. You know, we obviously pitched it as a sort of a handcrafted bag that's better quality than others. But we got involved in the craft and really understanding the mechanics of putting a bag together. I think the timing was sort of right. People really started, there was a bit of a move towards an artisanal sort of consumer behavior, supporting local. Also, sort of at the same time, social media started taking off. So it was quite easy and quite cheap to get your brand out there and get some eyeballs on your brand. But initially, the support obviously came from family members who wanted family and friends, and, you know, the whole sort of varsity supporting us to, you know, a sort of community support got this thing going.
When you started the brand to now, how much has your philosophy, how you do things, even around operations of your company, how much has changed looking back at, you know, the first product that you put out into the market and maybe the second one to now?
Yeah, geez. I mean, in 11 years, a lot can happen. In the early days, we started the business with an idea, really. Got a leather craftsman because, I mean, obviously I'm not a skilled craftsman, so I can't myself make a leather bag. But got a guy who knew how to make it, bought a leather machine and took us a couple of weeks to make one bag, So that's how it started to where we are now. I think obviously we've expanded our product offering quite a lot into footwear, into apparel and accessories and whatnot. So I think the biggest change is sort of growing a team around us that can support us, putting people in specific departments that know a lot more than we do, people with experience. So building a team around that, and then obviously the supply chain, coming out of a small room at the University of Stellenbosch where we made a bag to call it a global supply chain now that crafts and manufactures our products.
Yeah, that must be quite a lot of responsibility. I mean, I can imagine in the beginning days, it was fun. It was, you and your brother and perhaps other business partners looking at each other and getting stoked that, okay, we made a couple of sales. But now as the company grows, that's a lot more responsibility. How have you handled that?
Yeah, I think, with anything that's worthwhile, it comes with quite a lot of responsibility and stress. As long as you keep that stress sort of healthy, it's more passion and purpose-driven business than anything else. That's how we started. It's passion and purpose-driven business, and we're trying to keep it like that. We're trying to sell the dream that we obviously want to build a proudly South African brand that can represent South Africa on a global stage. Hopefully one day, we're starting to dabble a bit in the UK and whatnot, but. It is a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility now. I mean, as you grow, a lot of mouths to feed. Yeah, we've got 160 odd employees on our payroll. So, it's a completely different animal these days. But, you take it step by step, almost day by day. Obviously with a bit of a long-term view on things, but trying to ensure that, whoever you get on your side of the table in your team, that they sort of driving towards the same end goal. And then we do it from the right sort of passion, purpose-driven perspective.
I see. How much obviously you said that you are a qualified chartered accountant and your brother is an engineer. How much of your qualifications have played a role in running the business? And perhaps also your personalities. If you take a look at you and your brother and other partners, how much of that plays a role into building a successful business?
Yeah, I mean, huge. I mean, coming from my perspective, my brother is an engineer, but not really the typical engineer at all. I mean, he's a bit more creative, so he's more involved in the product side of the business. Chartered accountant, obviously the basic finance skills. You don't necessarily have to be a chartered accountant to figure this business out, but I think in the basic fundamentals of starting a business from a cash flow and financial planning perspective helped a lot. And then also in the early days, trying to get landlords or convince landlords to give space in shopping centres to you, if you just two guys putting a business together, I think chartered accountant gives a bit of credibility also from a banking perspective once we got to a point where we had to, borrow some money or to get some working capital. But I don't think you necessarily have to be a chartered accountant to start to build a brand.
No, absolutely. But it definitely does help and goes a long way. So now let's take it back. I mean, we've talked a little bit about building the brand, why you started the brand, and the challenges that come with a growing company. Let's take it all the way back to Léan when he was a small boy. Did your parents talk about money around the table?
Yeah, I was always sort of very aware. I always felt bad when we went out for dinner and whatnot. I tried to order the cheapest meal. I was always trying to sort of save money. I'm not sure why I had that mindset. My brother, to the contrary, had the opposite mindset. He would always order the most expensive thing. I think in the early days, my dad is a doctor, a medical doctor. He kind of installed a principle that, he has to, if he doesn't work, he doesn't get paid. So, he has to physically go and do the work. So I won't say we were brought up with an entrepreneurial mindset. We were all, I just remember us being absolutely sport mad. We all had this dream of becoming a Springbok one day or playing for the Proteas. Sort of a sport mad family. Eventually, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I played a bit of professional golf at some point. But yeah, so it was more my dad just, hammering on the fact that you need to sort of business is the way to go. You obviously need to strap in at some point, and he wanted us to study something proper first and then hopefully get into a business where you don't physically, I say physically not doing the work. We still work quite hard, but something that can run without you physically being there. So my dad, when we went on holidays, like my till stops now. We're on holidays, not just an expensive holiday, but my till also stops in the background. So I think that was sort of a principle that my dad sort of hammered on. He never wanted us to become doctors as a starting point. My dad's super passionate about his work and he absolutely loves what he does, but it's just that one element where he's solely responsible for his income and he has to physically go and do the work himself.
So what are some of the lessons that you got from growing up, especially when it comes to money, your own personal finance, not the business's money?
I always grew up with a sort of, and I think to a degree, the mindset changed quite a lot with the generations. I think the Gen Zs think a lot differently about money than probably we did, and then the baby boomers completely different again. I think there's so many different ways and angles with the internet, way technology is going, where AI is going, where you can make money from a very young age if you just understand how. To me, I always had I wasn't too focused on money, but I always try to save a little bit on the side. I know, I'm sure on your podcast, people talk often about, saving a bit for when that day comes.
For retirement and a rainy day.
Yes, exactly. But that was sort of growing up. But when we started the business, my mindset was just applying everything back into the business. We always were very, very bootstrapped, never really wanted to buy anything fancy for ourselves. We wanted to push all the money back into the business and grow it. I guess that comes when you really believe in something and you can see where this thing can go. There's always a bit of a carrot, you can buy a nice car, a nice house, and then what? But, always pretty conservative. I think when we started, obviously I was a chartered accountant. I was probably the poorest chartered accountant in the world when we started. And challenging times, but you start and they start there and then eventually you catch up to them. Yeah, especially when I played professional golf, I was very, very poor then. You're either very rich or very poor when you play golf for a living. I think it's more just sort of the mindset of taking a longer term view. It's important, growing up, trying to building something gradually up on the side becomes big over time. So with my kids now, I've got 3 girls. I've got something on the side just running, a small amount that I just put away every month. 20 years later, that could be something significant.
Yes. That's some sort of contradictory to with some entrepreneurs where they just put absolutely everything into the business. When you start talking about products, some sort of investment or savings, they say, no. My business will completely support the kids, will completely support my retirement. What is your view on that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. You obviously want to be in it for the long run, but you never know, especially in our game. Retail is a very competitive space. You got to continue to evolve and elevate your product offering. Economics in South Africa, we've been going through a bit of a tough time. Our business has luckily stood the test of time, and we're doing quite well. But you never know. So I think it's important, just in principle, to have something on the side, have some investments on the side, so you don't have all your eggs in one basket. We've had all our eggs in one basket for a very long time now, and it's obviously worked out quite well. But I think it's important if you can. But I think entrepreneurs in general will just plow everything into the business. Absolutely, and I think if you just go through all the entrepreneurial journeys of successful entrepreneurs, they obviously went through ups and downs. So there'll be days when or years when you're super wealthy and years where you have nothing. So we have just gradually sort of bootstrapped this thing organically. We haven't really seen the fluctuation. Been very sort of calculated in the way we grew this business, but I don't think it's necessarily the same precedent across the board.
You are listening to More Than Money, a podcast collaboration brought to you by Sasfin Wealth. At Sasfin Wealth, we empower our clients to reach their global investment goals, to retire with dignity, and to leave a lasting legacy. If you would like to have real money conversations, visit sasfin.com/wealth and talk to us. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Can you tell us about your kids? You said you have 3 girls. And what do you think you're teaching them about money as they are just observing you? You know, it's normally not sitting down with them and saying, this is how you handle money, but just by observing you as their father.
Yeah, I think it's, kids these days, I thought about it the other day, because we actually don't deal with cash anymore, or like hardly ever deal with cash anymore. They don't understand the actual implication. They just think it's, we're just tapping phones and you're getting whatever you want. My kids are still young. I've got a 2-year-old now, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So they're still quite young. And they, even at school, they get these bands that we load money on and they just tap it. We're trying to get them to understand that you've got X amount of money and if it's gone, it's gone. But I also want to go back to giving them physical cash and just so they understand the principle of something costs money. So and then we try and incentivize them to with little odd jobs and whatnot I won't say jobs, but sort of household chores, whatever you want to call it, to get them to understand the principle of money firstly. Because I think it's important, it's kind of flown past me, but the understanding that money is not an unlimited source. You can't just tap your phone for everything. So yeah, it's just too easy. So even now when I say no, that thing's too expensive, they're like, but why is there not enough money in your phone, or what's the story? I don't understand. So getting them to understand how much things cost, and like there's a lot of effort that goes into getting the money, and it's not just an unlimited source. So I think it's an important principle. We grew up like that. Like our dad was pretty, I won't say strict, but like we understood what things cost and that you can't just get what you want. You got to earn it first. It also came sort of from I'm not sure if you're aware of where our brand name comes from, but so freedom of movement was actually a house rule that my dad implemented. We were obviously 4 boys all over the show, just playing ball sports and very social, all 4 of us. So they had to implement some sort of rule. He called the rule freedom of movement, where if your academic performance were up to scratch, you had freedom of movement. So you could go out, especially in high school, twice a week. It doesn't matter, because you took care of your own responsibilities and you showed him that you can take care of your own responsibilities. And he gave us a bit of freedom to that degree, but you had to earn it first. Yeah, I think it's good. It teaches you sort of a responsibility and also accountability at an early age, where, you want to do something, but first you need to earn it. You can't just have it. And I think it's the same principle with money. You want this thing, but like my daughter would want this new doll or whatever. I'm still trying to get them into sports and easing into it, but for now, all girly stuff. Yeah, just trying to get them to understand that you need to sort of save up and eventually get to the 300 Rand or whatever it may be to buy this thing. You can't just get it. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And you and your partner, did you start talking about money from early on when you guys met, or was it something that you only started talking about once you were married?
When we got married, I just qualified as a chartered accountant, got married, and I decided to go play professional golf for a year. So money was a bit of a problem. I luckily had Deloitte, who I did my articles with Deloitte. They gave me, backed me to play golf for a year. So I took care of a bit of, they just paid basically for the golf expenses, but I still had to earn money on the golf course, which I obviously didn't do. So money was a bit tight in the beginning, and then starting a leather bag business on the side. It wasn't the glory days. No, so it was tough in the beginning, but obviously very rewarding now later down the line. But we spoke about money, trying to save something on the side, but it's hard to save if you're not earning much. It's difficult in the beginning. But now we've got proper sort of financial plans in place.
How has the money conversations changed, obviously, from the beginning to now?
From the beginning, it was just trying to get by on a monthly basis, obviously renting whatever we could afford, trying to be a bit more conscious about what we spend money on. Now we're looking at, clever investments for our kids one day. I had for the first time bought property. Actually, that's also a completely separate conversation, buying versus renting. But sold my house and I'm actually renting a house now in Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch is also a different, it's a very difficult property market, but we're very calculated in the way we see things and view things. Obviously, it helps being a chartered accountant, but doing a bit of long-term sort of financial planning, especially, in a business that's established now, but, having a bit of a longer-term horizon to ensure that our kids are fine. I think that's sort of the main priority.
Yeah. So you mentioned obviously building a business, it has its challenges. In the beginning, it's quite tough and you're barely just making ends meet. I want you to tell me about the one time that you splurged.
Yeah, it's just my general sort of personality is I'm not a splurger. Like, I'm very calculated. To give you an idea, I still drive a very old Land Rover Defender, and I'm supposed to be buying a new car now, but I don't know, it feels nice having this old car. I kind of like it, but I think what I would splurge money on now is maybe more experiences rather than things. Last year I took my family to a trip to Europe and to Paris and went to watch the Rugby World Cup and whatnot. I'd rather do that than buying something fancy. But yeah, that's probably the only thing I would splurge money on is a proper sort of family experience. Or maybe, I'm going on a golf trip now with my brother to Ireland. I'd spend money on things like that. I mean, obviously I'm in a very fortunate position where I don't have to buy clothes. We make pretty much everything I would want to wear. And in terms of cars, obviously we actually were in quite a big car accident 3 months ago. My wife drives quite a nice, a decent, safe family car. But I probably won't ever splurge money on a Ferrari or a Porsche or anything extravagant like that. It's just not my personality.
Now, you just mentioned obviously, getting into an accident, and that's some scary stuff. And as a business owner, what are the types of insurance do you make sure that you have in place just in case, because life, you never know when it's going to throw you a curveball. How important is it to have insurance in the form of life cover, critical illness, that sort of thing, but obviously your car insurance as well?
Yeah. No, well, obviously very important. We have played around with the idea. We haven't actually taken out a sort of a key man insurance policy in our business yet. But it's basically my brothers and I are shareholders, and I think there's an understanding that if something happens, that our families will be okay. Obviously, on my personal side, I do have proper life cover. I've got an income protector in place, all the basics, that if something happens and I become, I don't know, paralyzed or I die, that my family is fine. So a life cover. And then we've got a bit of a where my brothers would buy my shares and my family would be okay. But it's obviously very important. Obviously, car insurance goes without saying. That saved us quite a bit because our car was completely written off. And then just all the general basics, life insurance, income protector, those things.
Yeah. And you mentioned something very important that I see quite a lot of entrepreneurs leave out, is that key man policy. That key man policy is so key to making sure that the business still runs smoothly, even if one of the members pass away or gets disabled, whatever. Why do you think sometimes we leave these things for, later? Like you said, you've been thinking about it, but you just haven't gotten around to it.
It almost feels like there's a lot. It's one of those important but not urgent things. It's probably something we need to start looking at. I think the business is established enough now where if I were to go, we'd probably find someone capable to step into a CEO position. I think in the early days, probably key man insurance is probably a bigger risk. Where now, we've got an established executive committee. I'm still pretty important, I hope, to the business, but not to a degree where if I'm gone, that
it would fall apart if you were not there.
Yes, exactly.
What do you still hope for your business? What are your dreams and goals for this business?
Our brand name speaks to that. It's freedom of movement. So we continuously want to move forward. So we obviously have big growth plans to continue growing, and to use our business as a force for good. I think that's super important in South Africa, that as we grow, that we also use the money and our growth to build stories and to build communities where we can. So we've got a big CSI sort of program. We've got a campaign that we call Farm Forward, where we put shoes on the feet of communities in need. We also build in collaboration with the Khaleesi Foundation, obviously very close relationship with Sia Khaleesi. We built a rugby field. We're building we're part of a big infrastructure structure project in Zwide, in the community where Sia grew up. But my hope is that we use our business as a force for good and as a proudly South African story to inspire others. I think entrepreneurship is super, super important in South Africa. And I think if we can explain and tell our story more often and more platforms, that, we'll hopefully inspire other entrepreneurs and other South Africans to also build and start new businesses. I think that's ultimately the only thing really that could solve the unemployment rate, or at least improve the unemployment rate. And and I think our story is a very basic and simple one. I drew a lot of inspiration from the Nike book. I'm not sure if you've read it.
Yes, I've read it. It is such a good book. It is such a brilliant. It's actually one of my favorite books that I read. I bought that book for anyone that December after reading it, to my family, friends, my niece. I said, you need to read this book. It's called Shoe Dog, yes.
Shoe Dog. Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's sort of what inspired us initially. Is how do you build a Nike? You don't. If you want to build a Nike, you won't start. So because it just sounds impossible. But if you read the story, you just got to start by selling a pair of shoes out of the boot of your car, and then build it from there. So that's what we did. We made a leather bag, and 11 years later, we've got an established business. So it wasn't necessarily I think the Nike story is probably a bit more complicated because they're a game-changing industry. They really got involved in the running shoe side of the business initially. To us, but just the nature of the story and the way it was told is just one step at a time. Start with something. You don't have to have everything figured out on day one. You don't have to have a fully fledged 5-year business plan. Because I think what the problem is, as people, if you start thinking about starting a business, you overthink it, and then you end up doing nothing. And to us, it would be very easy to not have started it, because it didn't really make sense to make a leather bag. Why would you want to make a leather bag? We've been doing it for decades and centuries even. So, but I think the principle is just, you got to start. You got to start, get stuck in, and you'll figure it out. But you need a bit of a one-liner that defines sort of your brand identity and your purpose of what is it that you're trying to achieve. And it could be way down the line, but don't overanalyze it, because then you probably won't start.
With that, Léan, we are going to call it a wrap, because you just gave a whole TED talk there, and I really appreciate that. And I know that I was inspired by your story, and I know many entrepreneurs listening to this, and even just normal people, that they will get really inspired. So just start. Don't overthink it. Thank you so much, Léan.
Thanks, Mapalo. Appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
This was a Sasfin Wealth podcast. Visit sasfin.com/wealth for more information.